Happy New Year, everyone! New year, new episode. Well, new year, new season. New year, new season. Yay! And to start things fresh, you know, I managed to get the new hard drive for the computer, so I can start rolling with some edits. New components for the studio have come in. It's already starting to be it's starting to come up a little bit Millhouse here. So I was trying to decide the first episode of the new year. Should I watch some stuff and talk about movies or Netflix kind of thingamabobbers, you know, who's and what's it's. And, I decided to make some good use of the Friends of Bestow TV group on Facebook, facebook.com/group/Friends of Bestow TV, and promote some interaction. Let's get in there and interact. And, if you guys want to participate in polls moving forward, please join that group and let's get this show rolling. So between the two shows that I was going to offer for this first episode was Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, because we always have to talk about Star Wars, or the Wednesday show. Tales from the Jedi, of course, is Disney Plus. The Wednesday show based off of the Wednesday Addams character is on, of course, Netflix. I guess soon. I don't know if anybody else saw this, but I saw somewhere that I guess Amazon bought this and now it's migrating to Amazon. Interesting stuff. So anyway, I put the poll up and I decided to, give it a full week. So I had to wait a little bit longer. We have 47% of the people in the friends group said that they want Tales from the Jedi. 38% want Wednesday, and 15% just wants to watch them before they listen to the podcast. So I'm sorry, Larry and Paul. You might want to skip this episode and come back a little bit later after you watch these shows, because I'm going to spoil the shit out of them. Wednesday with 38%, Tales from the Jedi 47%. I am glad I watched the hell out of Wednesday to prepare for this. I'm going to ignore the votes and I'm going to talk about Wednesday. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to talk about Tales from the Jedi. Very easy watch, actually. It's I think there's only 6 episodes. Let me double check. Yeah, there's only 6 episodes to the season. They're only like 15 minutes each. So it was just like a really, really quick and easy watch. I may end up having to talk about Wednesday to fill up the rest of the time of this podcast. But very, very quick and easy watch. Before going into this Tales of the Jedi stuff, now here's a story of a version of young Paul versus the old man Paul. Paul being me, not Paul Tidd, who voted in the results here. Young man Pantsless Producer. How about that? We'll delineate by doing that. Used to love the hell out of like the Star Wars universe and how they interconnected to this stuff and how they, all the books tied into the movies and tied to each of the books and just, painted this broader universe. It was the Marvel universe of Star Wars. And there was, I think there was 3 books, but I only recall only ever owning 2 of them, which was Tales from the Cantina and Tales from Jabba's Palace. And these books but it was just a collection of short stories. Some of them were standalone. Mostly it kind of tied into the book itself. So there was generally like an overarching story, that each, you got like maybe a certain plot point that was from different perspectives of different characters throughout the books. I know the Tales from Jabba's Palace had 2 particular stories that were important to fandom. I believe one was a Mara Jade story, which was a very important character at the time before Disney nuked the hell out of her. And the other one was the Boba Fett story, which I believe is his escape from the Sarlacc pit, which was a very key point to the stories until they came up with a pretty boring Disney Plus series for that character. I think I've read Tales from Jabba's Palace. I don't recall much from Tales from the Cantina, but I do recall more from Jabba's Palace, in particular because of the Mara Jade story and because of the not Luke Skywalker, the Boba Fett story. And like I said, sometimes, there would be like a standalone story. So there was like I believe it was like the it might have been like the frog creature or something. There was one of the beings that was there. That was this. He ascended to another plane of consciousness. If you see them, there's like these little spider creatures that have like brains on them. They're actually like monks that actually live in the palace. Again, whatever happened to those in between Return of the Jedi and the new Disney Plus Boba Fett story? Let's get on that. Comment your theories on that below, or wherever you can, or on the Facebook groups page, wherever. But yeah, there was this being that was trying to ascend to a higher power, and he actually he ends up a brain in the jar by the end of the story. Spoilers. I guess I should warn you. Spoilers of like a 30-year-old book. But a lot of things were like, aside from like Luke coming in to assassinate Jabba, there are a lot of like different murder. Is it murder? Is that the kind of word? Yeah, like there's a bunch of plots against Jabba. A lot of people were plotting his death, and if I recall, again, spoilers. If I recall, the chef might have poisoned Jabba, and he was going to die anyway, regardless of whether or not Leia strangled him. Or I don't even recall it. Did he eat the food, or somebody else ate the food, or I don't know. I don't remember. But yeah, it was just a lot. So there was the main interweaving plot was generally like sometimes this murder plot, and sometimes you got the perspective of the guards that are suspecting that there's a murder plot and they're trying to foil it, and so on and so forth. And then there's also like I believe like this being he appears in spider form later on, and he may actually appear in like his physical form earlier on, depending on when and where the story takes place. Generally, the idea behind Tales of the Jedi, when they said Tales of the Jedi, I was kind of like, ooh, they're kind of taking this idea from this book series that Disney flushed down the toilet and is no longer canon. I didn't read about I didn't read the plots or anything to kind of, be fresh on my viewings. But my general understanding is that these were all stories that took place at different points of different eras. So they didn't interconnect. That is false. They very much interconnect. And of course, if you listen to our trailer episode, we talked about Tales from the Jedi in the trailer episode as well. And based on my opinions on what I saw in the trailer, was kind of what I knew of Tales from the Jedi. So without any further delay, let's get right into this. So we get into I have a little cheat sheet here I have to bring up because I don't remember the titles and stuff. But we start with a title called Life and Death, and we get a background story of baby Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka Tano. I don't think I've ever I think usually I say like Ahsoka Tano. I think I usually say the name wrong. What's new? But yeah, you get baby Ahsoka Tano because we gotta tap into that Grogu vein. We gotta tap into that Mandalorian vein. Babies are popular, so now we can make the baby line of Ahsoka toys. And of course, there's an Ahsoka Disney Plus story coming down the pipe here. And of course, so a lot of these stories in the Tales from the Jedi are probably going to tie back into her story, probably give you a little bit more insight. Of course, if you watch like the Clone Wars, you know a little bit more about her. I don't think I've progressed more than like 1 or 2 seasons into Clone Wars. Sorry, so I can't give too much insight. I know like we watched the first couple episodes that became episodes, but originally they were released in theaters, and I remember taking my kids to go see that in the theaters, and that was our introduction to Ahsoka. But by and large, if you've got to skip a story, if you don't have, let's see here, 30, so if you don't have an hour and a half to spend, and you want to cut 15 minutes out of your day, and only spend 100, an hour and 15 minutes, you can skip this Life or Death. It suffers from the prequel bullshit. I mean, these all kind of suffer from prequel bullshit, but it's just like, Ahsoka's born, and she's put in a situation. Like I started watching this actually during Christmas, but like everybody was coming in and out. It was Christmas time. So I think I only really watched like the first episode and the second episode, and then afterwards, my attention was diverted elsewhere. So I ended up restarting the series after this vote. And and so my initial viewing of this, I thought it was like Ahsoka was born, and then her mom takes her hunting, and then she gets stolen by basically a saber-toothed tiger. And I was like, wow, Ahsoka is like powerful, and she's not even a year old. Second viewing, she's born, and then there's a year passes in between before that. She takes her out on her first hunt. So she's a year old when the life or death event happens. Her mom goes hunting. Ahsoka gets kidnapped by a saber-toothed tiger thingamabobber. I don't know what the official canon Star Wars name is for it. You think that Ahsoka's going to die. She uses her Jedi powers. Oh no, the tribe finds out that she's a Jedi. She brings the saber-toothed tiger brings her back unharmed, and in the end. As far as like overall story, I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, I mean, it's a one-off. I guess it's the standalone story. It doesn't really add anything to the canon. It doesn't really add anything overall. I mean, if you're just into it for a cutesy kind of story, that's fine. I mean, like I said earlier, this suffers from the prequel-itis thing where it's like, here's a character that is in future film franchises, and here we'll put them in peril. I wonder what will happen. Will the character die? Will the character be named? Will the character be maimed? No. No, it won't. But to tap from a Mr. Lobo theory is like, well, sometimes it's just about the adventure. But I'm not even sure that this is really about the adventure. I mean, there's not really much of adventure to this for me to be like, oh, this is awesome. Weird that it's the first episode, but I guess whatever. Disney, I guess Disney does drop them once a week, so. I guess whatever. It's a thing. I mean, is it bad? No. Is it horrible? No. It's okay. It's a thing. It tells you more about her. She shows her powers at 1 year old. At 1 years old. Is it 1 years old or 1 year old? At one. She shows a lot of power for a young youngling. That's even worse. I didn't even make it any better. So moving on, we're gonna go to Justice now. Justice, you actually get to see a young Qui-Gon Jinn as a Padawan. Young Qui-Gon Jinn that looks very, 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 very much like a young Luke Skywalker from the original Star Wars. I'm assuming he's beyond that braided bullshit that the Jedi have, or whether or not that, maybe he's from a generation that didn't have to have those braids, that weird haircut and the braid. I mean, I thought that once they kind of ascended and they don't have the braid anymore, they don't really need to, tag along with the master. Maybe it's just a mission. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a mission that he went with his master on. And it's a planet that's just basically it's just garbage. It's just run to the ground and everything. And they're on a mission to investigate the abduction of the senator's son. He went missing, and of course they go into the town, and pretty much everybody's in on the plot. They stole the kid, and you kind of learn that once the person from that planet, the senator from that planet, became in a position of power, he just basically left the planet to go rot. Again, remember, Star Wars is like once something happens, and once what that planet is, that's what that entire planet is. So I'm assuming that he just wants that entire planet to go to rot. That planet, not a town on that planet, that entire planet. So he left it all go to rot. You got an entire planet that's that's all city. So I guess you got a planet that's all like desolate because of this a senator's ignorance. The Jedi kind of side with the villagers and stuff. I mean, even the son kind of sides with the villagers. He's kind of saying, how could Dad let him, let his people live like this and not care. And of course, the senator, the dad, finally shows up, and he's ready to gun everybody down, and he'll gun the Jedi down as well, who are kind of investigating and don't want their investigations sullied or spoiled. So this is where you kind of see Dooku kind of step into the dark side. He shoves Qui-Gon away using the Force, and he uses some Force choke on the senator. He's ready to kill the bastard. He's ready to take him out. And eventually the son is freed, and he has to convince his dad. He's like, this is kind of your fault, dude. I enjoyed seeing like background stories of Dooku. I'm sure he was probably fleshed out in the novels. I've never really read the novels. I'm sure he might be fleshed out in Clone Wars. Again, like I said earlier, I've never really progressed past episode 1. The first season, I would say. So I know Dooku appears in that, but I think when you see him in the Clone Wars, he's pretty much Sith by that time. I am going to come back to this in 1 second after we talk about episode 3, Choices. Count Dooku and Mace Windu are investigating a death of one of the I think that's a Jedi Master. It's either Jedi Master or one of the. It's one of the Jedi Masters from the Council. Has turned up dead, and they're off to investigate this. The reason why I said that I'm going to put a pin on Justice and come back to it is that I'm kind of unsure, like the way the storytelling is the way the storytelling is with Choices. So in sequence or chronologically. We'll go back with sequence. In sequence of films or of stories, I think Choices takes place before Justice, because Mason and Dooku are investigating this murder of the Jedi Master, and they're going to this planet, and they uncover this thing where the senator's corrupt, and once he got elected into power, he's starting to let his people like die and rot. And when they go to investigate, they try to cover it up. I think the guy that was with the Master, he survives, air quote, but I think he dies during the battle when they try to kill Dooku and Windu. But it basically they were trying to cover it up, and they kill the Jedi Master when she comes. I believe it was a she to investigate. So she gets killed, and they're just trying to cover up the senator's bad doings. So if you put it in order, because it just doesn't make sense, where it's like, they're dressed. First of all, they're dressed similar. They have like the royal blue robes with like gold ornate decorations on them and stuff, which was the same kind of stuff that was on the senator in the other episode. So it doesn't make sense where it's like, is it the same? Like, does everybody dress the same, and all the planets are just kind of getting this way? No, I think it's the opposite. I think that Choices happens first. They kind of uncover it, and that's where Dooku ends up returning to the planet sometime later. The other difference is in Choices, Dooku is clean shaven, and in Justice I believe he has the black beard. So there's some time that goes in between. So I think like when they're there, the corruption's just starting, and in Choices you kind of get the aftermath. I'm not quite sure why I guess they did it in this direction to show the fall of Dooku. Because then you kind of get into the whole thing of like, well, now with the Jedi Master that's dead, Mace Windu is elected to step up and be part of the council. He's not a part of the council in this story. And Dooku kind of like smells corruption, where he's like, oh, well, the Jedi are getting manipulated. I think Mace is kind of siding with like the senators, even though they're supposed to be neutral. And he's just very suspect of everything that's going on here. It's like, oh, well, Mace had something to gain out of all of this. Mace gets to be in charge of the Jedi Council. At what terms, why, so he's distrustful of what's going on. So I believe like Justice shows like him starting to go down I wouldn't say starting, like I think Choices shows him making that decision of going down the dark side, and Justice is kind of the end result of like he's decided to go down the dark side. So it's like, again, I'm not sure why they flip-flop that, but I guess to hold up on the whole idea of the whole anthology kind of idea. So then the next one we go into is the Sith Lord. And this takes place during episode 1 prequel. This is after the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. This is a story that very much features Yaddle, which people are plenty curious about Yaddle and whatever happened to that character. You see Yaddle in the council in episode 1, but you don't really see her. I believe it's a her. It's voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard, I believe. So assuming the gender, I believe it's a her. I'm going to refer to it as a her anyway. So you don't really see much of her after episode 1, and I believe there was books or whatever that stated what happened to that character, or that character had stepped down, or that character has disappeared, or so on and so forth. But again, Disney flushed all that stuff down the commode, so is it canon or is it not canon anymore? But she invites Dooku to Qui-Gon's funeral, and he kind of turns it down. So she suspects something's up with him. And here, she follows him, and he's having the secret meeting with Darth Sidious. So yeah, he's kind of pitted against Yaddle. Yaddle's, overhears him talking with Darth Sidious, talking about the corruption, within the Senate, talking about the corruption within the Jedi. I don't know if either of those things were actually spoken on in the episode, or that's me reading into it. But yeah, she's kind of uncovered that kind of plot, and this is basically him taking his full step into becoming a Sith. His own Sith. Well, it's actually him taking place at Darth Maul, because I believe they do talk about Darth Maul, and that Dooku didn't even know about Darth Maul during this time. So it's basically Dooku stepping up and becoming the one of two. The Sith only have the rule of two. There's only ever two, because of corruption they would end up killing each other. So there's only ever a master and an apprentice. So Yaddle kind of uncovers this, and she's going to spoil the plans and stuff. So this is Dooku full on Sith Lord. Him stepping up and having to take out Yaddle. And spoilers, he takes out Yaddle. He commits murder. He murders one of his own. That's why you never see Yaddle after episode 1 moving forward, because Dooku kills the shit out of her. Justice, Choices, and Sith Lord are again, these stories tied together. They're anthology. They take place at different points in time. Choices and Justice are a little bit more tied together than the Sith Lord. The Sith Lord actually connects the dots a little bit better to the episode 1 versus the rest of the stuff. There's actually a scene where he goes into the library and he deletes the data about the cloning planet, about Calamino. So when in episode 2, when they go to find out about Calamino, and it's like there's no data of that planet, that's Dooku that's doing it. And they talk about Cypher DS too, and I don't know. Like, I always assumed that Cypher DS was another character. He's always portrayed or always talked about as being an older Jedi. I don't know if Cypher DS is supposed to be like Dooku's alias. They talk about Cypher DS briefly, but I'm still clueless of who Cypher DS is. So yeah, this kind of connects to episode 1, and this connects to the other 3 stories. It kind of completes the circle, and you kind of see that Dooku is full on Sith by this time. He basically is. You get the impression that Sidious has been whispering into his ear about the corruption, corruption. He starts with the corruption of the Senate, and he's like seeing that the senators are letting his planet die, letting his people that elected him die. He doesn't give a shit. He sees Mace Windu stepping up into a position of power because he's just in a position where that is key for him, and it's whether or not it's kind of dubious of whether or not I'd assume, because the Jedi are supposed to be noble, that I don't think Mace was doing it for dubious reasons, but it does look suspicious in the eyes of Count Dooku, who's probably being manipulated and being, all these things are being whispered in. So he's being manipulated by Sidious. Love the fact that we kind of actually do add a little bit more texture to the prequels and work it out. The next one is Practice Makes Perfect. I assume that this may tie into the Clone Wars. Again, I've never watched the Clone Wars. I've never watched the Clone Wars past season 1. I don't know what happens to Ahsoka. I assume that she survives in Order 66. She's in the series that takes place after Clone Wars. She's in, of course, her own series. She's in The Mandalorian. But I never I don't think I've ever seen anything of how she got away or how she escaped Order 66. I assume that Order 66 must happen during Clone Wars, and maybe this was, maybe we got that answer. And just because I've never seen it, I never put two and two together. So basically, like, she's being trained by the Jedi Council. You see those little orbs, floating around that you see in the original Star Wars that Luke is training with, and she's training against them, and she's she's really good at it. But Anakin pulls her to the side, and it's like, well, this doesn't have real world applications. I'm gonna if you agree to it, I'm gonna train you in the real world applications of this. And so he goes and he takes her in front of Captain Rex and his platoon, and they're just to fire stun. Yeah, they're supposed to fire at her with the stun setting to train her because it's more random. It's more randomized, and she just gets knocked out. And eventually, like, the series ends with Rex taking her into a room with a bunch of battle droids. And that's how the episode ends, which is where I assume that it must tie into Clone Wars. This might be the Order 66 kind of thing, because Rex is bringing her in front of the droids, and I'm assuming that Rex is not affected by Order 66. I mean, there are the Bad Batch are a bunch of clone troopers that are not affected by Order 66, and Rex may be one of them. Not bad. Not bad. I think it makes me want to kind of watch Clone Wars more so now than before, to actually see what it ties into, or at least the episode that it directly ties into, if it ties into the direct episode at all. I assume it does, but assuming makes an ass out of everyone. Then the final episode is Resolve. So we kind of see what happens, with Ahsoka, who's she's in hiding like everybody else. The Jedi, this is post Order 66. She's working on a farm, and she's kind of forced to expose herself because the farmhands that she's working with, the brother of the sister, there's a brother and sister. The brother's just a dumbass, and he's overloading the pallets to try to get more hay on it, or whatever the material that they're going to sell to market, so that they can get more money out of. He overloads it. It collapses. It almost kills the sister, and Ahsoka's forced to use the Force. So she kind of exposes herself to the sister. And so the sister knows, and kind of like, oh, well, come with me, and, come to the town with me and help me sell this thing, sell the stock. And Ahsoka's like, you really need to keep this between us. You can't tell anybody. There's repercussions for if people know that I'm a Jedi. So they go to town and sell the wares, and what little does she know is that the brother has kind of put two and two together. There's some dialogue where it's like I think like the brother is more on the side of the Imperials than on the rebellion side or peaceful side, because he's like, oh, I believe it was him that was saying, well, we used to side with these people. We supported these clones when the Clone War started, and now all of a sudden we want to turn our backs to him. So he's got dubious intentions. And when Ahsoka and the sister come back, the town's destroyed, and all that's left is the brother and the father. And Ahsoka's forced to fight an Inquisitor. So we kind of get a tie-in with the Inquisitors from many of the series now including Obi-Wan. And basically her coming full front, where it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to step out and kind of like defend other people like me. I kind of glossed over the fact that that the opening scenes take place during Padme's death, and she's present, and she ends up talking to not Wedge Antilles, the senator from Alderaan, who's basically Leia's adopted father. And he's the one that kind of, because she, Ahsoka was gonna like kind of flat out disappear, and he kind of convinces her to take a communication device and says, hey, if you ever decide that that it's time to stand up and fight, give me a call. So nice little tie-in where you get more with Alderaan. I mean, it makes the whole death of Alderaan more poignant, I guess. So we're basically at the end. I mean, this is all the series that was in it. I know earlier on I said, old Paul versus young Paul. Young Paul used to love the idea of everything being connected and loving the novels. I don't think I ever came around full circle and said, oh well, old Paul hates that shit. It just becomes obnoxious when you get movies like Solo or the Obi-Wan series where it's like, all you're doing is filling every single little crack. Even a Rogue One. There's no room to think. There's no room to breathe. Everybody's related to everybody. Every plot line's related to every plot line. There is no other plot line except for the Skywalker saga, and that's it. And it kind of gets obnoxious where it's like, well, I like these characters. I want to see adventures with these characters. But I also want to move on. I'd love to see more stuff with Rey and Finn and Poe Dameron. If they didn't shit the bed bad enough with those characters, I'd like to see more about. I was hoping with Tales from the Jedi that we didn't just kind of focus on this circle that they did focus on. I wanted to see more about pre Clone Wars or pre Jedi Council. I wanted to see stuff that was even older, but this still kind of just focuses on that prequel era and just kind of fleshes out those characters that we don't really see too terribly much about in the background. With that being said, I also kind of like the fact that we kind of flesh out those characters. That's what I kind of wish that they would do with the new trilogy of films. Again, I don't know if they shit the bed bad enough that they can't do anything with that kind of stuff. But I know, you only have 2 hours to tell a story, and you've got 3 stories to tell. I wouldn't mind seeing a story where we kind of flesh out the in-between stuff, between that stuff. I mean, at one time, the prequels were garbage and shit anyway. Nobody liked them. We weren't allowed to like the prequels. And now you got Clone Wars and everything, Clone Wars and Tales from the Jedi and Bad Batch and everything that kind of fleshes out, the stuff in between and kind of it makes it all work. I mean, even The Mandalorian kind of fleshes out Clone Wars stuff. So, I kind of wish that they would do that with this other stuff. I kind of wonder if they're doing the thing where they wait long enough where this is nostalgic for the people, for the younger kids that watch these 3 films and didn't have a negative opinion about these movies. They didn't give a shit because they enjoyed it, because that's what we're going through with the renaissance of Clone Wars. Where it was they were kids that grew up watching these movies. They didn't know that they were shit. They didn't care. They are nostalgic for those movies, and now when that stuff is coming around, it's targeted to them. Ranking wise, Justice Choices and the Sith Lord are the best stories of the whole thing. Again, if you only want to spend 45 minutes, just watch those 3. I think that's worth the time. I also like the whole idea where, and that's just the whole thing of streaming, where we're not forced into 22 episodes in a season, all half an hour a piece, that they can do shorter segments. And I kind of like that. I mean, that's kind of the problem I have with Clone Wars now, is there's just so much of it that it's just going to take me forever to get through it and watch it, versus like this, where it's just, it's just like an hour and a half watch. So I would, those 3 are the top of the pile. Bottom of the pile, Life and Death. I could do without that. Practice Makes Perfect would be okay if I knew the adjoining material, and Resolve, Resolve totally works out. I'm sure that Resolve ties in with the Ahsoka series that's coming to Disney Plus. I'm sure that maybe all this kind of ties in with the Disney Plus stuff. So I'm a little bit over time, but there it is. Thank you, everybody who voted at the Friends of Bestow TV Facebook group. Please join the Facebook group. I'm going to do more polls more frequently, and I apologize to Larry and Paul for spoiling this if you've listened to this episode. But check back often. I will put polls there more frequently. And here's to season 3 of BestowCast. TTFN.